Hey you, it's CovertGoBlue, and today I wanted to take a look at Standard, the meta games for best of 3 and for best of 1, and talk about what has Phyrexia All Will Be 1 actually done for us. I think I'm also going to do a top 10 review show where I go back and actually look at my top 10 and talk about whether or not I was right on those things. I might actually wait till rotation for that, but for right now, I think that it's a good time to reflect on the current Standard metagame and see exactly what we've gotten from our big Phyrexia All Will Be 1 release. For the record, I love the set. I think it's got a lot of cool cards that have made me very happy. Historic Brawl has kind of been ripped asunder by Atraxa, but I like playing Atraxa, so I'm not even that upset about it. But Standard, I think Standard leaves a lot to be desired, even though that there's a lot of cool cards and cool strategies to explore. It feels like Standard has, well, let's just say I'm not feeling the change. The change I can believe in hasn't arrived. So we're looking at the Magic.gg Metagame Mentor article every week. This one includes the latest 4 regional championships. There have now been 2 weekends of regional championships. The regional championships are basically going to be the big ta-da for this particular set of Standard, with the culminating in the US regional championship or North America regional championship that is happening at DreamHack on April 5th, 4th, something like that. So that one hasn't happened yet, but a lot of regional championships have already happened around the world. This is probably the biggest event this Standard format will see. So where are the new cards? We're going to go over some of the winners, but first the meta game. We've got number 1, Grixis midrange at 26.9% of the field last weekend, 27%. Still posting a 52% match win rate, and this was the big deck coming out of the Brothers War. So it's still big and still winning more than it's losing. It has not been supplanted. It has not been defeated. Mono white midrange. This was the deck that gave it the hardest time coming out of the Brothers War, and it is still here. Mono red aggro. Deck was pretty much non-existent in best of 3. Like, people would see it sometimes. It got better, but it's still not posting a 50% match win rate in competitive best of 3 play. Mono blue tempo getting worse, getting much worse over time. I think it was doing pretty well as a dark horse contender out of the Brothers War. Esper Legends, 60%, and Esper Legends, for the record, was the top win rate percentage the week before this as well. So the meta game didn't exactly adapt and find a way to beat it in time. It's the only 60%er on this list, and I'm not going to go down the whole list, but what I want to point out is that all these decks were popular before Phyrexia All Will Be 1. Grixis, mono white, mono red, mono blue, Esper, and then finally we get a new deck. It's Selesnya Toxic, as I sometimes mock it on stream, the All Will Be 1 draft deck taken to Standard. But it is getting that win rate, and it is doing work. Let's get into some specific cards, because sometimes you don't reinvent archetypes, sometimes you just add to archetypes. So this is the winning Grixis mid-range list from one of the regionals. And new cards? New card check? Crickets, even in the sideboard. Crickets. Yeah, the lands. It's the Blackleaf Cliffs and the Dark Slick Shores, which have continued to make the mana bases for these decks much better, and they take even less damage from their mana base, giving aggro decks even less of a chance. And yeah, why add new cards? How about Esper Legends? Esper Legends is one archetype, the only 60% win rate archetype, and you could argue it is because they did get some new cards. There are 4 copies of Skrelv in this deck. That's it. That's it. Those are the new cards. There are 4 copies of Skrelv in this deck. Once again, really helped out by the mana. I find it kind of crazy to look at a deck like this with 4 Dark Slick Shores, 4 Seachrome Coasts. You're in a format that has the Rafine's Tower that comes into tapped tri-lands that also cycle. Don't need them. Just do not need them in this kind of deck. Why have a land enter the battlefield tapped when you can just curve out with perfect mana? Kind of amazing. Soldiers. Azorius Soldiers won one of the tournaments. So where are the new cards here? Azorius Soldiers. Anybody? We got those Seachrome Coasts, and going all the way down into the sideboard, we have nothing. Nothing? Oh my goodness. So when you look over the deck list here, this Soldier's deck I find particularly interesting because it's a very different one. There are no Thalias. There's a lot of the 3-drops, like the Brutal Cathars are in the sideboard, but there's no Siege Veterans. Instead, we have 4 Zephyr Sentinel and 4 Protect the Negotiators and 3 Wandering Emperors for a flash approach. You guys are going to see me play a version of this deck in a few days, sometime this week. I've already recorded it. I didn't even know about this deck, but I'm happy to see this because one of my takeaways making that video was that the Soldiers deck with like flash threats and just playing Thalia was a little bit overrated, and that maybe you should lean into the flash side a little more. But of course, best of one, best of one is tricky. It's a little different. Grixis mid-range. This is another one that won a tournament, and it's got the Blade Coil. That's cool, except it's not a new card, is it? So we continue to look, and it's like, what did Phyrexia All Will Be One actually do for Standard? And so far, the answer is Skrelv. The answer has been Skrelv so far. Here's another winner, Mono White mid-range. And in this one, we do have 2 Eternal Wanderers, and this was the card that like really had a big footprint on the format in week 1, the Eternal Wanderer being the most played new card. Atraxa being another one. You've seen no Atraxas here. The meta definitely just adapted enough to take out the Atraxas without having to change very much about their decks. Just a few sideboard cards seem to have done the job. What you might recognize about this deck, and this is another one that just warms my heart because I made the video before I saw this. 4 Demolition Field, 4 Field of Ruin, mono white, land destruction for those Esper Legends players and those Grixis mid-range players who can't be bothered to run basics. You love to see it. But as far as new cards, it's just the Wandering Emperor. Anything down here? There's some ossification down here. I usually run those main, especially in best of one, but here, just a bit of a sideboard card along with Skrelv's Hive as kind of a resilient threat to go alongside Wedding Announcement. So for those mid-range grind fests, that makes a lot of sense to me. I love the idea of sideboarding into like the Skrelv's Hive Wedding Announcement combo. But yeah, that's your best of 3 meta game. It's very grindy with Azorius Soldiers kind of breaking the paradigm and possibly not even running Thalia. Like, this version is very different, and you can imagine people were very surprised when they did not get Thalia'd. But I've also seen like Soldier and Esper Legends type lists. You see this one's running Thalia alongside Wedding Announcement, because I guess they're just so good it doesn't matter if either you pay more or discard your Wedding Announcement or discard your Thalia. Whatever it is, Rafine gets the job done. But I mean, so best of 3, what did we really get? We got Skrelv. But I mean, let's go to best of 1, because in best of 1 surely things are a little different, right? A little better. Yeah, we're gonna go over to some untapped best of 1 results. I can tell you, just playing Mythic every day, it's been very hard because I felt like the best of 1 meta is so samey to the one before that I don't feel like anybody even crafted the new cards. And I can't even blame them. Here's your top win rate deck. It's Azorius Soldiers. Does it have any new cards? No. And to be fair, it's difficult because while Soldiers will be printed in every set, you're not going to find them pushed as hard as they were in Dominaria and the Brothers War probably for a long time. But it's still like kind of painful to see. How about Naya Humans? So this is a high win rate deck that I almost never see played. And I've also got some thoughts on this archetype. I've got a video coming out this week that is green-white, kind of Legends/Humans that I think is actually even an improvement on this. I think it's very, very good. This deck, once again, does get that win rate boost because it is running what is arguably the card to care about from the set, which is Skrelv Defector Might. Protecting your creatures is so huge. On top of that, there's Melira. Melira is also a very, very good card for this specific green and white creature-based archetype, whether it's Legends, Humans, and whether you go into Naya or Abzan or whatever. So Melira, the Living Cure, just for the body and the protection of the thing that you don't want to die. Like, it is really amazing getting to play decks that have 4 Skrelvs and 3 Meliras. Your Brutal Cathars don't just die on sight. That is a huge difference from the other decks that play Brutal Cathar. So strongly encourage these. Is against mono red, they hate this. Suddenly your Brutal Cathar isn't just rolling over and dying immediately. Mono white Soldiers. Yep, that's a high win rate deck. Tier 1. So boring, dude. I can't look at this deck without screaming boring. But yeah, no new cards, doesn't need them. Mono red burn. This is mono red. They play mono red. New card mono red? None. Just absolutely none. Mechanized Warfare version, running End the Festivities, bunch of 1-mana cards, Reckless Impulse. Yep, no new cards necessary. Mono red aggro, the version with Thundering Raiju and Squee instead. Yep. No cards to see here. Nothing to worry about here. Phyrexia all will be one, failing to even crack those decks, which is good. I mean, honestly, if they had new cards, they'd probably be even better. Selesnya Toxic. Now, once again, we get to the lone archetype created by this set. In Best of One, Annex Sentry is an all-star, and you basically have to play it because it competes with the other cards in the deck. It's probably like this and Bloated Contaminator. The 3 drops in Selesnya Toxic are actually a good reason to play the deck, which is not what I expected going into it. And Homestead Courage is actually a very solid Best of One card because it just makes your clock quick while also having defense, so they can't race you. But yeah, Selesnya Toxic, definitely not the draft version of the deck. A lot more rares here, but not what I expected to coming out of this. Like, my early versions of this Toxic deck were so bad, but it has been refined. Sentry is definitely an important missing piece. I don't know if a Johnny is necessary, but the deck does work. And the kind of Seed Core, I think you also need Mirrex. I think you need that way to keep cranking out mites besides the Hive in the late game, and then make them bigger with Seed Core. I would run some Mirrex, but otherwise, yeah, this deck works. It is the lone thing from Phyrexia all will be one that feels like a new contribution to the meta. And then Mono Black. Mono Black gained Phyrexian Obliterator. The big reason that that's good is because Mono Red is super duper popular, and it just does this splash damage to Green and Gruul, 2 decks that would very much like to exist, but now they also get obliterated, which is just kind of brutal. So, I mean, going down the list, like Sheldred's Edict, I honestly don't think this card should be in the deck. Every time I've played with this card, I've been disappointed in it. I think it should just be Go for the Throat. I'm completely off Edict at this point, unless it serves a very specific role. But yeah, we all know Mono Black, still good. So, I mean, that's where we're at. These are the decks making up the tier 1 and tier 2 of Standard in Best of One, and they're just new cards. Skrelv, you could say Malira, and you could say the green-white Toxic deck. And that's disappointing because, I mean, you see all these different aggressive options. You could argue that every single one of these decks is aggressive, and it is a very snowbally aggressive format. You have to get down here to Mono Black quote-unquote control, which still runs things like Underdogs, although my list with the Life of Toshiro Umezawa is up here. Thank you to everybody who played that a lot. You guys got about a 55% win rate, making it, like, at least on this list, the top control archetype. The closest to a tiered control archetype. So good job on that. But I mean, that's not the way I want to do it, man. Like, monocolor control, that's very different. It's not very different from the monocolor aggro, if we're being real. And yeah, it just feels like this whole meta is one straight rush downhill to see who can get the opponent dead first, or play some paradigm breaker that the opponent can't kill because they're running narrow, cheap removal spells, because everything in their deck has to be narrow and cheap. I think Thalia puts a big constraint on the format that way. I think that just the imperative to Best of One, your mono red, it like adds that. And then but by the time we get down to like Rakdos mid-range decks and mono white control decks, it's like it's clear that these are just a cut below everything else, and it's an issue. It's going to be a challenge going forward. How on earth are these decks going to rise and like have good matchups? It feels like nobody has good matchups against the top tier aggro decks, really, because if you go second and their draw is reasonable, you like all the removal spells in the world don't matter because there's so much value. So I don't want to turn this into a long complaining session. I just find it interesting that a set as sweet as All Will Be One with so many cards I was excited about, and like 10 Planeswalkers. They printed 10 freaking Planeswalkers in this set. Are any of them seeing play? I don't think we've seen a single one between the deck list in best of 3 and best of 1 that we just looked at. I mean, that's crazy. That is so wild compared to where Magic was back when, say, War of the Spark came out. I mean, what do you think is up with that? Anyway, let me know your opinions in the comments. What is it going to take to change the standard? Is it going to take a rotation at this point? Is there's just too much for best of 1? There's just too many good aggro curve out threats, and for best of 3, there's just too many efficient answers between sideboard and main deck, and the colors are just too easy that you can just play all the best of everything in every mid-range pile. So what's it going to take to shake this format at the foundation? Will it take Oko? Will it take dinosaurs? Because those are coming in the fall. Thank you for watching this video. I'll see you in the next one. You're cool.